Alright guys, I'm just going to be a disembodied voice for this video, but I've got me some coffee here and I want to talk about Alfonso Goméz-Rejón's movie, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Now there is a lot you can talk about with this film, which is actually pretty surprising coming from a young adult coming-of-age movie. But once you find out Goméz has worked extensively with Martin Scorsese and he's spent years in the film industry, this may be slightly less surprising. But I didn't know anything about anything when it came to this film, so I was pretty surprised. But all you need to know is a brief synopsis, so you can either go watch the trailer up in the corner, or you can be satisfied with these 17 words. Comical filmmaker boy hangs out with dying girl with leukemia, and the boy has a best friend. As you can imagine from a film with this plot, at least a good one, there are going to be some major relationship and character developments. What I want to talk about here is solely how the cinematography, primarily through camera movement and composition, works to foster these developments from Greg's perspective. I'm not going to talk about the metaphors and images in the movie, or the duality of the characters, or anything else that's going on. I'm just going to talk about one thing, how the camera puts us inside Greg's mind. But really this is made up of several things, so let's go ahead and start. And if you believe in spoilers, I guess there'll be some. Part 1, Categorization. As he describes in the movie, Greg does not really belong to one group or another, but instead to all of them and none of them. As we know in the real world, life isn't precisely organized into these groups and subgroups, but Greg isn't so inclined to think so.
Yesterday you were saying you've mapped out the entire high school by group. What's my group?
Seriously?
Yeah.
Boring Jewish senior girls, subgroup 2A?
We know he constantly thinks in this categorical way because he explicitly tells us, but the camera work Goméz employs also reinforces this concept. Squarely framed shots, with lines running either horizontally or vertically to the screen, tell us about this feeling of organization and that everything is in its place concept. Even as the camera glides through his high school, the framing remains square, even between cuts. This sort of composition pretty clearly gives the viewer the sense of organization that Greg keeps in his mind. However, this technique is concentrated in the first portion of the movie, because once Greg meets Rachel, things change, but we will come back to this. Part 2, Listing Lazily Through Life. Like I've mentioned, Greg floats between these groups he draws and as an extension to life itself. Goméz mimics this quasi-apathetic lifestyle with the camera work he employs when Greg is acting in this manner. Around the time Greg explicitly tells us how he shifts amongst groups, the camera glides along in an analogous manner. When he tries to dance around his mother's wishes, both about college and about Rachel, the camera dances along too. And when he tries to skirt Rachel's questions about filmmaking, the camera follows suit yet again. Goméz's purposeful use of camera movement consciously and subconsciously cues the viewer into what's going on in Greg's mind, and lets us understand and relate to him on a level that isn't possible with solely dialogue. However, I said Rachel shakes things up when she comes along. Look at the first true moment Greg meets Rachel in the movie. No square framing, and it's completely static. Might Goméz be showing us the changes Rachel's going to bring into Greg's life? I'd certainly say so. We get similar movement, or lack thereof, when Rachel and Greg argue about her stopping treatment during a startling 5.5-minute wonder. Not only does this intimate situation change the lifestyle Greg is accustomed to, that is, the static and cockeyed continuous shot changes up from the previous gliding and square shots, but as an added bit of information about Greg, Goméz throws him in the background, masking his emotions even in this, the saddest and most angry shot of the movie.
Titties.
Titties?
Better play with them titties.
You was thinking that girl Madison had nice titties.
Part 3.
Titties.
The movie does a funny and great job of showing Madison as a disruptive force in Greg's world by using claymation and startling angles.
Word, you'll do it. Word.
But one of the more subtler methods comes later in the movie. By means of a lateral tracking shot, we're showing Greg and Earl being thrown out of the high school. But while most shots like this continue in one direction, or perhaps pause momentarily, or even more rarely change direction once, this shot surprises us by changing direction a second time, when Madison comes into frame. She catches the shot, disrupting the expected motion of the camera in the same way she has and does disrupt the expected direction of Greg's life, at least in his mind. Also, almost directly after the shot, when Madison asks Greg to prom, she is positioned above Greg and we get a wide low-to-high shot of her, putting her up on a sort of pedestal, and a high-to-low shot of Greg, putting him down below her. It's in the same way that Greg thinks of Madison as something bigger, more important than him, which he underscores by then asking,
Is this a pity date?
But with Madison's denial of it, we get a close shot that partially eliminates that perceived difference in status, showing that Greg himself has at least partially accepted her denial. Part 4. Distancing. Now, Goméz shows distance between characters in some pretty cool ways, but my favorite, because it's both effective and obvious without being intrusive, is, well, I don't really know if there's a technical term for it, but I'm going to call it split conversational framing. Now look at this case of joined conversational framing, which is another term I just made up. The characters are clearly occupying the same location and are clearly talking to one another. But take a look at this. During this conversation, it almost seems like the two are separated, each on their own side of the screen and neither placed in the same frame. This is because as Rachel's condition goes worse and Greg's search for belonging stagnates, a little rift has settled between them. Now look at another even stronger instance of this. Not only do Greg and Earl occupy different sides of the screen and aren't framed together, but they also appear to be facing directly away from one another. This sort of disconnect between the two makes sense, considering they just had a major falling out. And this is just another way that Goméz lets us inside Greg's mind. Part 5, where I wrap stuff up. So I really like this movie, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to try out a video like this. But I wanted to show some of the stuff going on, and I hope I did a decent job of that. Anyway, let me know if you've seen the movie or noticed the same things. What did you notice I left out? Anything like that. And if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend it. It's funny, insightful, and most especially extremely well thought out, which I appreciate a lot. I hope you enjoy this breakdown of me and Earl and the Dying Girl, and I hope to see you sometime in the future. Preferably the next time I make a video. Which means you would hit the subscribe button so you would know the next time. Thanks.